All right, happy Monday. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Liz Wheeler Show. Listen, this is kind of hard for me to say, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I'm glad I didn't go to the White House Correspondent Dinner events this weekend. And I hate saying that. I hate that thought is even in my head. I hate even thinking it. But here's why. I mean, look at this video for yourself. You've probably seen it. Cole Thomas Allen rushed the metal detectors outside the White House Correspondents Dinner at the Hilton Hotel in D.C., intending to kill the president, intending to kill the vice president, intending to kill the presidential cabinet, many of whom obviously were present at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. RFK was there. Rubio was there. Hegseth was there. Bessent was there. The sounds of Cole Allen's firearm firing was audible in the ballroom. That's how close he was. Now, thank God, of course, he was neutralized by Secret Service. He was not shot or killed. He was captured by the Secret Service, so he was unable to penetrate the security perimeter. But how? How did he even get this close? How did he even get to this point? Again, I'm glad I had a family obligation and had to turn down these invitations and couldn't go. And I hate saying that. I don't even like the sound of the words coming out of my own mouth. I hate that I even think that. The reason that I'm saying that to you today, the reason that I feel that I must say this to you today, is because assassinations work, which most people, especially on our side, won't say. Assassinations and assassination attempts scare people. They intimidate people. They cause people to change their behavior. They do not make us stronger in the aftermath. You'll hear a lot of people say that, but that's just a cope that we use as human beings to process the grief and the fear that we feel. In fact, actually, assassinations, attempted assassinations, political violence actually break coalitions. They make us weaker. And the left knows this. The left engages in terroristic violence because it works. And the left will keep committing or trying to commit hideous acts of violence against us until they can't, until they're stopped. There is no rhetoric that exists, no argument that can be constructed that will persuade them to stop. They simply will not stop until they can't go on. And I state this not speculatively, by the way. I state this with certitude because of what Cole Allen wrote in his manifesto. We're going to get to that in a second because we have to understand what the motivation was behind this attempted assassination. But before we get to that, I would like to note the reaction of President Trump. When President Trump heard these shots being fired, sitting at the head table, he knew what it was immediately. Of course he did. He's experienced this how many times now? He's faced more assassination attempts as sitting president of the United States than any president in U.S. history, and yet he's unflappable. He barely moved, even as people coalesced, Secret Service agents coalesced around him, shielding him with their bodies. President Trump posted this on Truth Social. Quite an evening in D.C. Secret Service and law enforcement did a fantastic job. They acted quickly and bravely. The shooter's been apprehended, and I have recommended that we let the show go on, but will be entirely guided by law enforcement. They will make a decision shortly. Regardless of that decision, the president posted, the evening will be much different than planned, and we'll just plain have to do it again. President Donald J. Trump. That's what the president posted as this was unfolding, before we even knew the name of the man who had opened fire, before we knew whether he was killed, before we knew if anybody had been injured. This was what the president said. Let the show go on. Meanwhile, at one of the head tables, Secretary of HHS Bobby Kennedy, as everyone around him was diving under tables for protection, Bobby Kennedy stayed seated in his chair with his head high. As everyone else took cover, Bobby Kennedy stayed seated. And then Stephen Miller, while Secret Service agents tried, you can watch this on the screen, tried to evacuate him, he did not let go of his own protective cover of his pregnant wife, Katie. You can see this unfold. First, they evacuate the president. And now we're panning to the table where the cabinet secretaries are seated. You'll see them in just a moment. You see a Secret Service agent trying to do a protective cover hold on Stephen Miller, who won't allow himself to be protected because he is using his own body to shield his pregnant wife. And then, of course, the head sticking out above the rest. Bobby Kennedy, seated again as a Secret Service agent, is hovering near him. Bobby Kennedy doesn't move a muscle. You know what I call this? I call this legendary courage. In the face of what I have to assume was frightening, because every human being gets frightened, this is the choice that these men made. To be not afraid and to put themselves in the line of fire to protect others. You know what? This is exactly the kind of men that I want running my country. Maybe it was a good thing that this was live streamed to show everyone the mettle, the character of these leaders of our country. But now let's get to the manifesto. Cole Allen left a manifesto. He actually sent this manifesto to his family and friends just minutes before he engaged in this attempted assassination, about 10 minutes prior to when he conducted this attack. And this is what he wrote to his family. He said, "Hello, everybody. So I may have given a lot of people a surprise today. Let me start off by apologizing to everyone whose trust I abused. I apologize to my parents," he wrote, "for saying I had an interview without specifying it was for Most Wanted. I apologize to my colleagues and students for saying I had a personal emergency. By the time anyone reads this, I probably most certainly do need to go to the ER, but can hardly call that not a self-inflicted status." He says, "I apologize to all the people I traveled next to, all the workers who handled my luggage, and all the other non-targeted people at the hotel who I put in danger simply by being near." He said, "I apologize to everyone who was abused and or murdered before this, to all those who suffered before I was able to attempt this, to all who may still suffer after, regardless of my success or failure." Cole Allen wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness, but if I could have seen any other way to get this close, I would have taken it. Again, my sincere apologies." On to why I did any of this. This would-be assassin writes, "I'm a citizen of the United States of America. What my representatives do reflects on me, and I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes." Cole Allen writes, "Well, to be completely honest, I was no longer willing a long time ago, but this is the first real opportunity I've had to do something about it." Let me pause right there for a second. At very first pass, before you even get into the man's politics, before you get into his motivations, what do you notice about this manifesto? This manifesto is written clearly and succinctly. This manifesto is not written in the deranged, demented way that, for example, Tyler Robinson's transgender boyfriend, Lance Twiggs, when his friend exposed some of the scribblings and nonsensical writings that Lance Twiggs had laying around their apartment, which was a hoarder's nest. You knew immediately that there was a significant, severe, I would say, demonic mental disturbance happening in Lance Twiggs's head. This is not like that. Cole Allen writes like a normal person writes. He goes, "While I'm discussing this, I'll also go over my expected rules of engagement, probably in a terrible format, but I'm not military," he writes, "so too bad. Administration officials, not including Mr. Patel, they are targets, prioritized from highest ranking to lowest." Again, let's pause right there for a moment. Lest anyone make the accusation, as former President Barack Obama did, that a motive has not yet been established. There you are. Administration officials, they are targets, prioritized from highest ranking to lowest. Now, I have no idea why he excluded Mr. Patel. That's very weird to me. I don't know why Kash Patel, the FBI director, would be excluded from this. I know there was speculation online that the FBI counts as law enforcement and Cole Allen didn't want to target law enforcement. I don't know if that's true or not. I just know it's very weird that Cole Allen did not include or specifically excluded Kash Patel from his line of targets. All right, let's keep going. And by the way, if you like this episode, please subscribe and share far and wide. We're going to get to this shock poll here shortly. Cole Allen writes, "Secret Service, they are targets only if necessary, and to be incapacitated non-lethally if possible. AKA, I hope they're wearing body armor because center mass with shotguns messes people up who aren't. Hotel security, not targets if at all possible, AKA unless they shoot at me. Capitol Police, same as hotel security. National Guard, same as hotel security. Hotel employees, not targets at all. Guests, not targets at all. In order to minimize casualties, I will also be using buckshot rather than slugs, less penetration through walls. I would still go through most everyone here to get to the targets if it were absolutely necessary, on the basis that most people chose to attend a speech by a pedophile, rapist, and traitor and are thus complicit. But I really hope it doesn't come to that. Hold on there just a second. And that might be the first evidence of any kind of derangement, because he goes through a list of people who are not targets, but said, actually, if you get in my way, I will kill you. And you're really complicit with all of these false accusations I'm making against Trump because you chose to attend this event in the first place. Whoa, whoa. Cole Allen then continues his manifesto. He says, rebuttals to objections. Objection number 1, as a Christian, you turn the other cheek. Rebuttal. Turning the other cheek is for when you yourself are oppressed. I am not the person raped in a detention camp. I'm not the fisherman executed without trial. I'm not a school child blown up, or a school kid blown up, or a child starved, or a teenage girl abused by the many criminals in this administration. Turning the other cheek when someone else is oppressed is not Christian behavior. It is complicity in the oppressor's crimes. Do you know what I notice about that paragraph? And we'll get to this more in a moment once we've completed the manifesto. Every single contention he makes, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 contentions he makes about the person raped in the detention camp, the fisherman executed without trial, the school kid blown up, and the teenage girl abused. Those are all false narratives that have been propagated by the mainstream media. They are lies that have been disseminated by the mainstream media, the propagandists for the Democrat Party. None of that is true. None of it is true. President Trump didn't execute fishermen. Those were narco terrorists from Venezuela. The school kid blown up, that I assume is regarding the story about the schoolgirls in Iran that were blown up, in the mainstream media, and the influencers on the left tried to accuse the Trump administration or Israel of doing that. Turns out it was Iran that did it all the time. A person raped in a detention camp by an illegal alien criminal who committed that crime. Yeah, that's why we don't want them in our country, because they harm people. The teenage girl abused by the many criminals in this administration, I assume he's referencing the Epstein files, but nobody's been louder about the transparency of the Epstein files than Trump supporters, than MAGA. And the people who've been exposed as complicit in the Epstein files and the cover-up have been Democrats. Again, not to get ahead of myself here, but all of his contentions, he's just parroting lies told by the mainstream media. He then goes on, objection number 2, this is not a convenient time for you to do this. So the would-be assassin, Cole Allen, then says, rebuttal, I need whoever thinks this way to take a couple minutes and realize that the world isn't about them. Do you think that when I see someone raped or murdered or abused, I should walk on by because it would be inconvenient for people who aren't the victim? This was the best timing and chance of success that I could come up with. Objection number 3, you didn't get them all. Rebuttal, gotta start somewhere. Objection number 4, as a half black, half white person, you shouldn't be the one doing this. Rebuttal, I don't see anyone else picking up the slack. Objection number 5, yield unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Rebuttal, the United States of America are ruled by the law, not by any one or several people. Insofar as representatives and judges do not follow the law, no one is required to yield them anything so unlawfully ordered. I would also like to extend my appreciation to a great many people, Cole Allen writes, since I will not likely be able to talk to them again unless the Secret Service is astoundingly incompetent. He then writes, thank you to my family, both personal and church, for the love over these 31 years. Thank you to my friends for your companionship over many years. He writes, thank you to my colleagues over many jobs for your positivity and professionalism. Thank you to my students for your enthusiasm and love of learning. Thank you to the many acquaintances I've met in person and online for short interactions and long-term relationships, for your perspectives and inspiration. Thank you all for everything. Sincerely, Cole, Cold Force, Friendly Federal Assassin Allen. He then adds an addendum. He says, P.S. Okay, now that all the sappy stuff is done, what the hell is the Secret Service doing? Sorry, gonna rant a bit here and drop the formal tone. Like, I expected security cameras at every bend, bugged hotel rooms, armed agents every 10 feet, metal detectors out the wazoo. What I got, who knows, maybe they're pranking me, he writes, is nothing. No damn security, not in transport, not in the hotel, not in the event. Like, the one thing I immediately noticed walking into the hotel is the sense of arrogance. He writes, I walk in with multiple weapons and not a single person there considers the possibility that I could be a threat. The security at the event is all outside, focused on protesters and current arrivals, because apparently no one thought about what happens if someone checks in the day before. Like, this level of incompetence is insane, and I very sincerely hope it's corrected by the time this country gets actually competent leadership again. Like, if I was an Iranian agent, Cole Allen writes, instead of an American citizen, I could have brought a damn Madus in here and no one would have noticed SHIT. Actually insane. Oh, he says, and if anyone is curious how doing something like this feels, it's awful. I want to throw up. I want to cry for all the things I wanted to do and never will. For all the people whose trust this betrays, I experience rage thinking about everything this administration has done. Can't really recommend it. Stay in school, kids. And that is how he signs off. That last paragraph, if anyone is curious about how doing something like this feels, it's awful. I want to throw up. I want to cry for all the things I wanted to do and never will. For all the people whose trust this betrays. Why? Why would he do this then? Why? Here's the most striking takeaway of this entire manifesto. Cole Thomas Allen wasn't trans. He wasn't radicalized into an Islamist. He doesn't seem to be part of some violent anarchist group. He was college educated, for goodness sake. He had a job in which he seemed to excel. Wasn't he awarded the Teacher of the Year award last year in his school district? He didn't seem to be your chronically online incel. As I said, his manifesto did not read as some demonic, nonsensical scribble. The most striking part of this entire manifesto is he's your run-of-the-mill leftist. He is your average, normal Democrat. Listen, this is what was so jarring after Charlie Kirk was killed. Yes, it was incredibly traumatizing to see a political assassination caught on video, to watch Charlie Kirk be shot on high definition video. None of us have ever experienced that before. And then the fact that it was our friend who was killed. The grief of having your friend tragically murdered. And Charlie was so normal. He wasn't fringe. He wasn't extreme. He was one of the nicest ones of us all. But in the aftermath of Charlie's assassination, it was so jarring. It was like a gut punch. Seeing the left, and I'm not talking about just the most extreme influencers online or the mainstream media or even elected Democrats. I'm talking about your average, everyday neighbors and friends and coworkers, people you went to college with, celebrating, justifying, explaining away, nodding understandingly about the fact that Charlie Kirk was assassinated because what? He wanted a secure border and stated plainly that men can't transition to be women. And we realized that this horrific crime, this murder, this assassination, this violence, this political violence, this is not coming just from the fringe of the left. This is not, the few batty people on the extremes of the left. This is a viewpoint that is held by mainstream leftists. I remember opening a personal social media account and seeing people that I knew from years ago, people who I don't consider to be particularly political, explaining it away and liking horrendous posts about, he got what was coming to him. And it felt like the rug had been yanked out from underneath us. Because, we've been watching Antifa violence and Black Lives Matter violence. We've watched the organized, funded, coordinated color revolution attempts And we see the crime in cities, and we've experienced the crimes committed by illegal aliens in our communities. But even all of those things could be explained away by the deliberate decisions of radical politicians on the fringe of the Democrat Party, until suddenly it couldn't. Suddenly, we realized that this was mainstream leftism, that your everyday, seemingly normal, nurse or teacher, or like I said, the bro you went to college with, that they were celebrating Charlie's murder because they disagreed with him politically. It was like experiencing, before we'd even had a chance to process the grief of Charlie's death, it was like a whole new wave of overwhelming grief to realize that this is the reality that we face. And that's not anecdotal. That wasn't isolated simply to Charlie's death. A shocking poll from April of 2025. So keep in mind that date, April of 2025. That is months before Charlie Kirk was ever assassinated. A poll found that 56% of self-identified left-wing respondents justified hypothetically murdering Donald Trump. 56%. Look at this on the screen. 56%, 31 and 38% of respondents overall, that's people from both parties, stated it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk, that's 31%, and President Trump, 38% respectively. These effects were driven by respondents that self-identified as left of center, with 50 and 56%, that's Elon Musk and President Trump respectively, at least somewhat justifying murder for Elon Musk and President Trump. 56% of people on the left. That's not just the mainstream media and the loudest influencers on X and YouTube, the freaks of the Democratic Party and Congress. This is over half of Democrats. That means if you walk up to someone on a street, you meet a neighbor, a coworker, and you find out that they voted for Kamala Harris or that they lean left, they are more likely than not going to justify a potential assassination of Donald Trump. If you think about this, it means they want this to happen. Because there's no circumstance that I can possibly hypothetically construct in my mind where I would ever, under any circumstance, justify the assassination of even the most horrific Democrat operator that I can think of. Ever. There would be no justification for that. It's illegal. It's immoral. And if you can bring yourself to say, even caveated, that it would be at least somewhat justified to murder President Trump, what that actually means is that you want President Trump assassinated. You want someone to kill President Trump. You want President Trump to die. Otherwise, there are no mental hoops that you could convince yourself to jump through to justify something so hideously illegal, so heinously immoral as the murder of someone who was duly elected to his office because you disagree with his politics. 56% of left-wing respondents justified a hypothetical murder of Donald Trump. It feels like the days after Charlie Kirk all over again. This is mainstream leftism. And by the way, it's being constructed. These leftists are being formed specifically to believe this. Look at this. Look at this statistic. Support for political violence in the United States by level of education. It's on the right. Look at the right half of this graph. Violence is often necessary to create social change. Do you agree with this or not? Of people who have a high school diploma or less, 23% agree that violence is often necessary to create social change. Of people who have some college or an associate's degree, only 20% agree with that. If you have a bachelor's degree, 26% agree with that. And then suddenly, if you have a graduate or professional degree, suddenly that number jumps all the way to 40%. 4 out of 10 Americans who have a graduate or professional degree, which means they've spent a significant amount of time in the college and university system in the United States, think that violence is often necessary to create social change. And these numbers are not hypothetical. The second question, this is the one on the left, if you are protesting something unjust, it is reasonable to damage property. Those who agree with that contention, the numbers mirror almost identically. 18%, if you have a high school diploma or less, agree with that. If you have some college and associate's degree, 13% agree with that. If you have a bachelor's degree, 19% agree with that. And then it skyrockets. It almost doubles. If you have a graduate or professional degree, 36% of respondents think that it is reasonable to damage property. This is not a coincidence that the increased amount of time, the number of years you spend in colleges and universities correlates to your increase, like exponentially increased support for political violence. This, by the way, is also not just on paper. This is something we hear the left admitting in their own words. James Carville, who is one of the preeminent Democrat strategists on the left, said this. Again, this was before this attempted assassination of Trump and his administration at the White House Correspondents Dinner. This was several weeks ago. James Carville said this about violence happening to Donald Trump. Take a listen.
I want to be clear on this. I do not want that man to die. I want to watch him suffer. And I can't watch a dead person suffer. So I want him to be fully cognizant come November. So when people tell him.
So James Carville wants something worse than death for Trump. He wants torture. And he wants to sit there and watch in enjoyment as Trump is tortured because he wants Trump to suffer. And then we have the New York Times. The New York Times platformed a left-wing influencer named Hassan Piker, who, by the way, is the nephew of the founder of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. People don't mention that. Hassan Piker was platformed by the New York Times, talking about, social murder and his sympathy for the killer of the United CEO, the killer, Luigi Mangione. And Hassan Piker, this is Hassan Piker. This is not to the New York Times, but this is the man that the New York Times platformed as some intellectual thought leader. This is what Hassan Piker actually wants to happen to you. Take a listen.
Poor people that they can afford housing in Berkeley. I don't know how that works.
My understanding is that the property owners who have properties there choose just not to rent it at all.
Yeah, kill them. Kill those motherfuckers. Murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their red capitalist bloods, dude.
That's who the New York Times platforms. And then we have Governor Tim Walz, who tweeted yesterday or posted on X and said, political violence has become all too prevalent in America. I'm grateful for the swift response from law enforcement at White House Correspondents Dinner. Oh, the platitudes from this man. And yet, this is what Governor Walz said when he didn't know that it was being reported on at a Labor Day picnic last year, joking about half expecting to wake up to the news of President Donald Trump's death. He says, you get up in the morning and you doom scroll through things. You woke up the last few days thinking there might be news. Walz said, smiling, just saying, there will be news sometime. There will be news. Then we have the actual Democrat Party apparatus down in Sarasota, Florida, their reaction to the failed assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents Dinner was to post, well, that sucks, because they wanted it to be successful. The left wanted this to be successful so much that on TikTok, there was a trend of leftists crying because Trump wasn't successfully murdered. Take a look at this.
That motherfuckers missed again. Oh my god.
I'm already crying.
Imagine faking your own assassination attempt for the third time and then everybody's just upset that it wasn't real and that you didn't croak.
I wake up each morning hoping he has died. I go to bed each night hoping by the time I get up in the morning, he has died. For the love of all things good, just fucking die!
They missed again? It's America! They missed again.
If somebody misses one more time, nobody wants to work these days. Nobody wants to get out there and work.
Because the left, this is mainstream leftism. Remember last week we talked about Candace Owens turning into a leftist? We talked about Tucker Carlson turning into a leftist, but specifically we talked about how Candace Owens has parroted the framework that the left uses to implicitly promote violence against conservatives. I have a follow-up comment on that and how it relates to this situation in just a moment. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor, All Family Pharmacy. Listen, our healthcare system is broken, and not because it needs to be fixed, because it is corrupt. It's not built for you. It's built for insurance companies and corporate pharmacy chains and bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci who think they should decide what you can access. But if you have the opportunity to use an institution of the parallel economy, an institution that doesn't hate you, that was actually created for you, do it. That is why I partner with All Family Pharmacy. They're an independent American pharmacy fixing what the system got wrong. No insurance games, no middlemen, just real access to the medications you and your doctor decide you need. They have all the medications that have been subject to political gatekeeping, like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, medbendazole. They have antibiotics, they have antivirals, they have over 400 generic medications for everyday needs, whether it's blood pressure, cholesterol, thyroid, diabetes, and many more. The process is super simple. You just go online, you fill out a short medical form, a licensed doctor reviews it, and if appropriate, your medications ship straight to your door. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz10 for 10% off. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz10 for 10% off. Don't do business with the people that hate you. Do business with the people that exist to celebrate and promote and empower your medical freedom. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz10 for 10% off. Remember last week we talked about Candace Owens turning into a leftist, and this happened simultaneously when Tucker Carlson promoted socialism and tried to incite an internal coup within the White House. He tried to inspire military members and members of Trump's administration to essentially stage the resistance to disobey Trump's orders if they didn't agree with President Trump's policy on Iran. Alex Jones also talked about using the 25th Amendment to stage an internal coup, even though Donald Trump is the duly elected president. Alex Jones doesn't like President Trump's policy on Iran, so he wants other people to override, to subvert your vote and take President Trump out. And Candace Owens we showed an example of this last week, has begun to use a leftist framework to implicitly call for violence. And when I say implicitly, what happens when the left uses this framework is they have this plausible deniability where they say, oh, we don't endorse political violence. We condemn it. We don't think that that's the country that we want to live in. And so they claim to stand on the moral side of the issue. At the same time, they engage in a emotionally manipulative tactic where they tell you that your life is at risk, that you are at risk of maybe even facing genocide, especially if you're marginalized, and that the reason that your life is at risk and that you should feel the fear is because Trump is Hitler, because Trump's an authoritarian, because Trump's a dictator. And what this does, this framework that the left uses, is when they tell you that Trump is Hitler, they are, of course, intending that your mind immediately go to the horrific crimes, the genocide, the Holocaust that Hitler committed against people who he didn't like. And they're hoping that you start feeling that you might be at risk, that you might be killed, and that your only recourse is to rise up against such an oppressor, such a murderer, before that crime is committed against you. That is their hope. And they defend themselves. As I said, they engage in this plausible deniability by saying, but we don't endorse the violence that, we're inspiring and encouraging and celebrating, and, we're sparking this fear in people's hearts and just planting the idea that they could do something about it if they wanted to. Well, Candace Owens began to engage in this tactic also. She said that everybody's lives were at risk, meaning Americans' lives, because of President Trump's military operation in Iran. She said, we got to do something about this. World leaders, like, what are they supposed to do? This is the leftist framework. And you remember that we talked about this leftist framework. This leftist framework has been the number one tactic of not just the mainstream media, but the elected elite class of Democrats in our country since the moment Donald Trump came down that golden escalator. This is Senator of the United States, Claire McCaskill. Take a listen to this.
A lot of people have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler and the use of the terminology like vermin and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in. He is not trying to expand the boundaries of the United States of America. He's not trying to overcome a neighboring country like Putin is in Ukraine. He is not going for some grandiose scheme of international dominance. All he wants is to look in the mirror and see a guy who's president. All he cares about is selfish self-promotion.
And what is that but the exact framework that I described? And this has been what the Democrats and the mainstream media and leftists in general have been engaging in for a decade now. We have a sitting attorney general in the state of Virginia who fantasized via text message about killing his Republican opponents and the children of his Republican opponents and is still in office. Outside of the White House Correspondents Dinner, the protesters that were out there were carrying signs that read "Death to them all." Death to all of them. And then when you notice, when you say, wait a second, the left seems to be encouraging, promoting, inciting, and celebrating political violence, you are gaslit. You are told, don't believe what's in front of your eyes. What are you thinking? Of course we don't want political violence. We don't even know what motivates some of these radicals to commit these crimes. Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, posted this in the wake of the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting. He said, although we don't yet have details about the motives behind last night's shooting at the White House Correspondents Dinner, it's incumbent upon us all to reject the idea that violence has any place in our democracy. It's also a sobering reminder of the courage and sacrifice that U.S. Secret Service agents show every day. I'm grateful to them and thankful that the agent who was shot is going to be okay. We don't yet know the motive. With all due respect, Mr. President, I think we do. The motive of Cole Thomas Allen is explicitly clear. He was trying to kill President Donald Trump. He was trying to kill Vice President J.D. Vance. He was trying to kill the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He was trying to kill the Secretary of the Treasury and everyone else in the Trump administration whom he could reach. And his motive was stated very clearly in his manifesto. His motive, he was inspired by lies told to him by the mainstream media that a young girl was raped in a detention facility by an illegal alien, a criminal who came to our country illegally, whom we were trying to get out of our country because he's a criminal who hurts people. And yet somehow the mainstream media has convinced Cole Allen that Trump is the villain here instead of the rapist who violated our law to come here and harm an innocent young girl. I beg your pardon, Mr. President, but the motive, the inspiration of the mainstream leftist beliefs that Cole Allen held and articulated were all propagated by the media. That President Trump was targeting Venezuelan fishermen, executing them without any just reason for it. Those were narco terrorists operating on behalf of Maduro the socialist dictator of Venezuela, and Trump had every right to militarily stop them from bringing drugs or guns or illegals to our country. The motive of this shooter couldn't have been clearer. Leftists think violence is okay. That's it. The left, and not the fringe, the left, as part of their ideology, and 56% of the left shares this ideology, thinks it's somewhat justified to assassinate President Trump. Did you know at the White House Correspondents Dinner just before it, there was a media or a letter that was signed by members of the media? I won't call them journalists because I don't think they are. 250 members of the media signed a letter before the White House Correspondents Dinner. It was addressed to all the people attending because there were mainstream media figures. It wasn't just Republicans and conservatives who were at that dinner. There were also some leftists that were there. And this letter signed by 250 members of the mainstream media encouraged those who were attending to, quote, forcefully demonstrate opposition to President Trump's efforts to trample freedom of the press. Forcefully demonstrate opposition? What do you mean by that? And I wonder, was the New York Times, after they platformed Hassan Piker, who said that he wants to, kill capitalists, he wants the red blood of people like you and me to be spilled in the streets because of our beliefs, after the New York Times platformed him as if he's some intellectual who we should learn from, some example, that they want to set. Were they in attendance? Cole Allen's manifesto wasn't as scandalous or salacious as, say, the Nashville Covenant School shooters was, that revealed how inspired she was to become transgender, to identify as transgender, and how that transgender identity inspired her to kill Christians and white people at a school that she had attended. It doesn't create as many headlines when you write coherently compared to the transgender boyfriend of Tyler Robinson and his demonic, demented scribbles and his day-long back and forth with ChatGPT and utter nonsense. And Cole Allen's manifesto is actually a bigger wake-up call. Because what happened in Nashville, Tennessee at Covenant School, or at that Christian school, showed us how the left was indoctrinating vulnerable, mentally ill young people into not only into the transgender pipeline, telling them that, oh, if you feel uncomfortable, maybe you're in the wrong body and you should start socially and psychologically and physically and chemically and surgically, quote unquote, transitioning yourself into the opposite sex. And by the way, once you start to do that, you're now a marginalized, oppressed person, and it's your role as a marginalized, oppressed person to rise up against your oppressor. And did I mention that your oppressor is a straight, white, Christian male? And we expose that indoctrination pipeline because it's happening over and over and over in the country. We're seeing this spate of transgender violence, and it's critical that we note that the amount of money that the medical industry makes from transgender surgeries and hormones and pharmaceuticals is scandalous and evil. And that teachers who groom young school children into believing queer theory, into believing that a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy, if that's how they identify, that's evil and it needs to be exposed and eradicated from our schools. Doctors who perform these surgeries should lose their medical license. Parents who allow this should be criminalized. But that pipeline can only affect a certain percentage of young people. it's only a certain percentage of young people who are vulnerable to that, who will fall for that, and who will go on to commit acts of violence in the name of that ideology. But what Cole Allen's manifesto and his social media footprint revealed the same thing. What his manifesto and his social media footprint revealed is something far more widespread. Something that reaches many more people than even the transgender ideology does. Something that sets the stage for a much, I would say even exponentially bigger cohort of potential assassins and people ready to commit violence in the name of politics. Because Cole Allen was not seemingly demented. He was not seemingly captured by the transgender ideology. He was not seemingly radicalized into a jihadist. He was a normal, average, mainstream leftist, your run-of-the-mill Democrat. And yet to believe these false narratives propagated by the mainstream media that Trump is Hitler, Trump is an authoritarian, Trump is a dictator. To believe these stories that Trump executes fishermen and that people within the Trump administration raped children and are hiding it. That's why they're not releasing the Epstein files, when in fact it's Democrats who had cozy relationships with Epstein. How many more such people are vulnerable? Cole Allen attended a No Kings protest in California. He was a member of a group called the Wide Awakes. It's a leftist progressive activism group. He was a teacher. Why is it always a teacher? And he was indoctrinated in the university system. He had a graduate degree. This leftist violence is what they believe in. They believe in it not only because they are perfectly willing to dehumanize you, but they believe in it because it works. It's not going to stop me from going to events in the future. But the reason that I said what I said at the top of the show, I'm glad I wasn't at the White House Correspondent Dinner. And I hate that I hate to say that. I hate that that's even in my mind. I hate that that's a feeling that's in my body. It's not going to stop me from speaking out and attending events and doing what I do, because I make the choice to do those things, and it doesn't have to, those choices don't have to be driven by feelings. But the reason that the left engages in violence, and that the reason it has been embraced, that violence has been embraced by a majority of leftists, is because it works. It makes people feel fearful. It intimidates people. It changes their behavior and their choices and their willingness to speak up, to defend the truth, to admit that they're right wing, that they voted for Trump, that they're Republican, that they want secure borders, that men can't be women and women can't be men, that crime in our cities, we don't have to tolerate that. That's a deliberate political decision. The left engages in assassination culture because it works. And they will keep engaging in assassination culture. Sometimes it will be thwarted the way that it was thwarted outside the White House Correspondents Dinner. And sometimes they will be successful, as they were when they killed our friend Charlie Kirk. They will not stop until they are stopped. You know, after Charlie, we expected a massive federal government crackdown on left-wing violence, on the left-wing groups that were espousing violence, on a crackdown on individuals that were celebrating this and encouraging this. We expected legal action to be taken, prosecutions to happen, these groups to be disbanded. What happened? Well, that did not happen. Demand that the federal government crack down on left-wing violence, or else these leftists will keep killing and trying to kill us. 56% want them to happen. 56% at least somewhat justify the idea of assassinating President Trump. They want him dead. And just as Cole Allen said in his manifesto, maybe you're not the target, but if you get in my way, you are. They want him dead, and they don't care if you are a collateral victim. All right, I want to give a shout out to our second sponsor for today, Preborn. Listen, we live in a culture of death, in a culture of violence where human life is discarded at the drop of a hat for any reason whatsoever. If it's not convenient for you, abort your child, women are told. Sometimes they're coerced by the father of their child or their own mother, their group of friends, the feminist narrative that they've been steeped in, that their careers are more important, that a child is a burden. At Preborn, women are not judged. Women are welcomed with open arms, and women are offered a free ultrasound. Do you know what happens when a woman sees her unborn child on an ultrasound screen? She becomes more likely to choose life for that child than to abort that child. I am encouraging you and challenging you today to be part of fighting against this culture of death. Just $28 from you provides one ultrasound to one woman in need. $140 sponsors 5 ultrasounds for mothers in crisis. Every dollar helps save babies. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. And when you say that word, baby, understand that that's not hypothetical. That is a little baby girl or a little baby boy whose life you are saving. That's pound 250 keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. And I thank you for your ongoing generosity to this profound mission for life that we share. All right, guys, make sure that you are subscribed to this show, youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. On X, we are x.com/Liz_Wheeler. And on Spotify, we are The Liz Wheeler Show. While you're subscribing on Spotify, if you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.